Good morning, friends, and welcome. We're the United Theosophists serving the greater Washington, D.C. area. Please come and visit us at 11 o'clock on Sundays at 4865A Cordell Avenue, Bethesda, Maryland. Or you can visit us at the website www.ultdc.org. We're on Facebook, and give us a call, 301-656-3566. Today's talk is on what is MANAS. Next week's is on the seat of memory. We're guided by the declaration shown, printed on the back of our program, which says, the policy of this lodge is independent devotion to the cause of Theosophy, without professing attachment to any theosophical organization. It is loyal to the great founders of the theosophical movement, but does not concern itself with dissensions or differences of individual opinion. The work it has on hand and the end it keeps in view are too absorbing and too lofty to leave it the time or inclination to take part in side issues. That work and that end is the dissemination of the fundamental principles of the philosophy of Theosophy and the exemplification in practice of those principles through a truer realization of the self, a profounder conviction of universal brotherhood. It holds that the unassailable basis for union among Theosophists, wherever and however situated, is similarity of aim, purpose, and teaching, and therefore has neither constitution, bylaws, nor officers. The sole bond between its associates being that basis, and it aims to disseminate this idea among Theosophists in the furtherance of unity. It regards as Theosophists all who are engaged in the true service of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, or association. The true Theosophist, it says, belongs to no cult or sect, yet belongs to each and all. Today's reading is from the Voice of the Silence. Search for the paths, but, O Lanu, be of clean heart before thou startest thy journey. Before thou takest thy first step, learn to discern the real from the false, the ever-fleeting from the everlasting. Learn above all to separate head learning from soul wisdom, the I from the heart doctrine. Yea, ignorance is likened to a closed and airless vessel, the soul a bird shut up within. It warbles not, nor can it stir a feather, but the songster mute and torpid sits, and of exhaustion dies. But even ignorance is better than head learning, with no soul wisdom to illuminate and guide it. The seeds of wisdom cannot sprout and grow in airless space. To live and reap experience, the mind needs breadth and depth, and points to draw in toward the diamond soul. Seek not those points in Maya's realm, but soar beyond illusions. Search the eternal and the changeless Sat, mistrusting fancies, false suggestions. For mind is like a mirror. It gathers dust while it reflects. It needs the gentle breezes of soul wisdom to brush away the dust of our illusions. Seek, O beginner, to blend thy mind and soul. And now for today's talk. What is MANAS?
Friends, the question before us, as was stated, is what is Manas? The short answer, of course, as many of us may know, is Manas is mind. We could end there and just ask for questions and comments and have enough, right? There's enough even just in that. Or we could dig more deeply and have a half-an-hour lecture every day for the rest of the year, just on what is Manas. Right? This is a topic that it's how far down the rabbit hole you want to go. It's a topic that touches on not only multiple aspects of the philosophy and the literature, but it touches on who we actually are, what we actually are as human beings. The stage of mankind is stated that we are manasas, right? We are mind beings. So in order to understand manas and mind, we'll look at it from a couple of different perspectives. We'll look at the origin of mind. Where does man get mind? Is it the same place as we get our body or our soul or our spiritual nature, or is it different? We'll look at where it fits in the scheme of the human principles, and we'll also look at what the powers of the mind are. In looking at the origin of the mind, we'll talk about its connection to universal principles, how it comes about and how it matches the universal principles, and also the three lines of evolution that are come together really in humanity and are defined by manas. First, though, the word itself, manas, it's a Sanskrit term. If you go to a Sanskrit dictionary, right, this is very sort of commonplace, mundane thing to do, but you get words. It will at least show us how it's used, right, in Sanskrit. It can mean imagination, conscience, spirit, intellect, inclination, will, temper, understanding, intention, invention, mind, mood, perception, opinion, intelligence, breath, living soul. It just goes on, right? It's a term that can be applied in many, many different ways, many different contexts. If you were to look up mind in the dictionary, you might find, in an English dictionary, you might find similar broad application of the term, right? It can be used in a lot of different ways. So when HPB chose it, it was for a specific reason. And the reason is that neither rather in particular, the English word mind doesn't really tell the whole story. And the Sanskrit use is probably too broad as well. But when we sort of link them together and bring manas into English in the way that Blavatsky does, we are talking about something rather specific. It has broad applications, as was mentioned, but it's something that there are certain qualities and parameters and definitions around that I think will help us understand the real meaning of this question. So we should talk about it as one of the principles of human nature. So there are 7, and manas is the 5th. So let's write this out briefly. We'll start at the top. The 7-fold classification of human principles, as HPB gives it to us, begins with Atma, right? And it's the absolute unmanifest universal principle. It never changes, it's immutable, as is said. But it does manifest in that it radiates outward and through its vehicle, which is called Buddhi, right? And that corresponds to the first manifested logos. It's called the second logos, right? This is the first logos, and this is the second. This is on the universal, like cosmogenesis aspect, right? So this is like first volume of the Secret Doctrine. These correspond to the first two human principles. As a foundation to that, we have the mind principle, MANAS. And this represents the third logos. Oops. But at the universal level, this is called Mahat. Mahat being cosmic mind, cosmic ideation, the mind principle, but pre-human. Like it's the human manas is based on the universal Mahat in that law of correspondences, as above, so below, that kind of thing. So from there on down, we have the rest of the principles. Here we have kama, which is desire. We can actually subtitle these. These are general terms. Desire doesn't really tell the whole story of kama. And then, let's see, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4. This is 5, 6, 7. Right, so the physical is at the bottom. And then the life principle, which called prana in Sanskrit. And then the astral. Linga Sharira. So Manas sits in between. And H.P. Blavatsky calls it she calls it not only a link, but a medium. And it's not only a link and a medium, it's the only link, the only medium between this universal higher nature and the incarnated individual. Right? This is the mortal man, and this is the immortal. Sometimes referred to as the reincarnating ego. Now, although this reincarnates, we have to understand Atma and Buddhi are universal, right? These are, you can say Buddhi is shared, right? Buddhi is a principle that is not unique to an individual. It's something to which all individuals contribute as they live their lives, life after life after life, in experience through manas. And that where it has aspirations towards the higher nature contributes to this character of the soul. And but Atma, of course, remains unmanifest, unchanged. The other terms that we have that we can apply here, HPB gives us, are that kama is the animal soul. Mind is the human soul. And Buddhi is the spiritual soul. So this puts it into some context and shows us how important this is as a principle. Right? I mean, not that there are any that aren't important, but we are living in this principle primarily. This is where we're doing all of our work. This is anything that you can say about us as a race of humanity, whether it be art or industry or technology or religion, it all happens as some aspect of manas. In The Voice of the Silence, she says that there are the seven paramitas, the seven keys that open the door to higher wisdom. These are just a list of things that we can ascribe to Manas, right? Charity, harmony in word and act, patience, indifference to pleasure and pain. All of these are happening in Manas. They don't really pertain to these in anything more than perhaps an automatic way. And these qualities already exist in actuality up here, and that's our goal as monastic beings, is to achieve these virtues. But that achievement, that stage of awareness and activity, all happens through this monastic principle. So that's what's meant when we say that it's about who we are and what we actually can do in any one life or multiple lives. All the activity, all the action is happening at the monastic level. So a little bit more about the origin. We mentioned here that it comes from Mahat, the third logos. That's at the universal level. There are classes of beings. We've had talks on this recently. I'm sure you could find them in the archive, where we talk about the Dhyan Chohans, which are the builders, the cosmocrators. They take these universal principles, embody them in a way that makes them available to the evolving life stream of humanity, right? By embodying them in that way, they set up this scheme, if you will, these principles that allow us to, first by natural impulse, and then by self-induced efforts, to evolve. She says that the bodies that were formed out of these lower four principles were not suitable to also evolve mind. Mind needed to be lit up by mind carried over by previous races in previous cycles of evolution. So from previous manvantras, mind is preserved. The highest aspect of mind principle is preserved. And she uses the analogy of a candle, one candle lighting another candle, lighting another candle, that the candle on its own cannot light itself. It has all the potential. It's a suitable vehicle to hold the flame and to bear the flame and to fuel the flame. But the flame itself has to come from somewhere else. So where it comes from are these mind-born sons, the Manasaputras, the solar Pitris. These are classes of beings that came from previous cycles of evolution and preserved this principle in order to pass it along when the form was ready. There's no point in lighting a candle before the wax is hardened, right? I mean, there's a process whereby the candle is made, and then when the time is right and the vehicle is suited, the lighting up can happen. And then that candle can light other candles, and so on and so on. Once mind is lit up, it can light other minds. The three lines of evolution, in this sense, are spiritual, physical, and intellectual. So this Atma Buddhi, with this sort of purest form of Manas, she calls it the silent watcher, meaning that the highest aspect of Manas is not really involved in the lower aspects of nature or of our principles, and only the lowest aspect of Manas is involved there. But this is the spiritual evolution that's taking place, and it really parallels and matches and is directly connected to the universal principles of evolution. These, the first logos, the second logos, and Mahat. That's the spiritual evolution. This is the physical evolution, using these principles to form a suitable vehicle. And then she calls the third stream of evolution the intellectual evolution, and that's where mind is lit up by the Manasaputras, and that influence is passed from one cycle to the next. Let's talk about the duality of mind a little bit more. It's a single principle. In fact, she calls it the one manasic ray. So it isn't two things. We talk about it in terms of higher manas and lower manas because functionally, in our current state of evolution, because we're kind of working through this principle, that's the effect that it has for us. It appears functionally as a higher and lower principles, but in reality it is just one principle. If you were to purify our experience and our intentions and our actions and everything about our lives in a way that manas was completely uncorrupted by the lower nature influences and was completely subservient and supportive of the higher nature, manas would no longer be dual. Everything kamic would be in kama, and everything manasic would be in manas, and it wouldn't be. It's only in that these lower principles can corrupt the higher, can corrupt manas, that we have this concept of a higher manas and a lower manas. Most of what we do is in this gray area where our desires, our feelings, our emotions, our physical and astral lives, these influence our minds profoundly, deeply, every day, all the time. It is only in relatively rare moments, at least speaking for this student, that we can find some kind of clarity, right? It's moments of meditation, deep meditation, where we can actually quiet the lower nature's influence. There's a manual for how to do this by Patanjali, right? The aphorisms on yoga, right? So that is all about the modifications of the mind. Those modifications are created by the connection and influence of the lower nature. Buddhi remains untouched by those lower nature influences, manas being like a kind of firewall, if you will, between the two. But it's the highest aspects of what we are able to do in our lives, meditation, charity, service, patience, all of these virtues that contribute to this universal Buddhic spiritual soul that we all share. In regard to lower manas, lower mind, Mr. Judge has some interesting things to say in the ocean that echo Patanjali's yoga aphorisms. He says there are four peculiarities of lower mind, and that it will fly off from any point, object or subject. It will fly to some unpleasant idea, or it will fly to some pleasant idea. Or, fourth, it will remain passive and consider nothing. These are peculiarities of the lower mind. So you can see that the capacity to give attention to something, he uses the word fly off from any point or fly to some pleasant idea. The capacity to remove our attention from one idea and put it onto another is a manasic power. The ability to quiet our thinking, like lower reasoning, ratiocinative thought, is a manasic power. But these are the ways that those powers get corrupted, right? the flying off from any point, object or subject, meaning inability to concentrate on something, flying to some pleasant idea, right? So that's the enticements of desire that are out there attracting us, and flying to some unpleasant idea. This is the lower nature, asserting fear, right? and attacking our attention because of our fear of mortality in whatever form that might take. And then remaining passive and considering nothing. This is just a shutting down of the principle itself. And there again, Patanjali's Yoga aphorisms is the antidote to all of that. And we're just about at the halfway point. Read a couple of nice quotes. Just to give a little bit more color to this. Speaking on the principles themselves, Mr. Crosby says, it's a book called Answers to Questions at an Ocean Class, so he's referring to some text from Mr. Judge in The Ocean of Theosophy, and in doing a kind of question and answer, and he says that each of the 7 principles of man is derived from one of the 7 great divisions of the universe. This could continue on, obviously. Sorry, lost my place. He therefore is directly connected with and related to every state of substance and every plane of being through these principles. Man is not his principles. They are his instruments or embodiments. For the soul's sake alone the universe exists. So all of this happens for evolution. It isn't that all of this happens and then coincidentally there's an evolution there. It's part of the process that the evolving humanity creates all of the systems and structures that allow this universal manifestation to happen, the mirroring of that manifestation into the human realm, and so we have this perpetuating cycle of evolution. Mr. Crosby says, the mind is just a lens through which we look, and according as we have made the glass we look through, do we see the world. We see everything reflected in the mirror of the mind. It is a reflection always, reflection colored and distorted by our own thoughts and feelings, characterized by the mirror we have. Anything that is said to us is always mixed up with the experiences we have already had. Consequently, it is not true unless our minds are true, right? So think of the like mirrors at the fair or a fun house, right? They're curved and distorted, and you can look in them and you can see yourself. You can see your head and your arms. Everything that is there, right? It's all real, but it's not, right? It's distorted, and it's distorted because the medium through which the experience is happening is distorted. So if this mind principle is a perfect mirror of the higher nature, then that informs and accurately guides all the activity at the lower nature, and so that's the effort that we have. We control the distortion of the mirror. That's in our hands. He says, it's stated that the masters are preparing the minds of men through their message of theosophy for their actual presence among us. When that will be depends upon humanity as a whole and ourselves in particular. So this suddenly makes this real, right? I mean, this ability to make our mirror as perfect as possible and align our thinking principle with the higher nature, align it with the spiritual soul, that actually impacts the progress of our evolution. It impacts the quality of our culture and our society by inviting the presence of Mahatmas. That's an important thing. Again, there's so much more we could do. I'm going to leave it there and open it up for questions and comments, sisters.
Okay, the way you have presented that, it looks like we have 5 lower principles, but it isn't so. Atma, Buddhi, Manas constitutes the higher triad, because Manas is part of that triad. It is the individuality that goes from
Yes.
life to life to life. In your designation, it doesn't show it that way.
Well, the drawing is flawed, for sure.
The
yeah.
lower principles, and it
No,
isn't
it
so.
was not intentional to put it with the lower
Okay.
principles.
Sorry,
It's
but
it's
other people don't know.
right. It's the foundation of this upper triad.
It's a connecting link, but it's part of the higher triad.
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's a passage in here, it's HPB, Writing in the Secret Doctrine. I think it's on page 38.
This is immortal. Immortal.
Yeah. She says, mind is a name given to the sum of the states of consciousness grouped under thought, will, and feeling. And I think it condenses it quite well. It is, I think, very important for people to understand that the lower aspect of our nature, as you have depicted in that chart, actually affects the lower mind, as you pointed out, that the mind works in 2 different ways. It's one principle, but in incarnation, it worked with the kamic principle, because in this developmental age of ours, we are depicting kama manas as sort of a united principle, because in your other talk, I think you said kama was really developed in humanity at this stage, and that is what we need to work on to be able to clarify that out of our nature so that the mind can express itself. But until such time, that lower mind is influenced by it. I think she explains it also in her article, Psychic and Noetic Action. It's a very good one for people to read if they want to understand how it works. But the higher mind is that divine mind, because it receives the light of Buddhi, so its nature is pulling the whole of it towards the higher nature,
Right.
if we will only align ourselves with it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important for people to understand
Yes,
that we form our own character
definitely.
by our thinking, feelings,
And will.
what else? The will,
Yeah.
as to how we use that will to constitute the action that follows the thought process.
Right. Yeah. Well said. In Psychic and Noetic Action, there's a footnote where she says the higher manas, or ego, she also calls it kshetrajna, which we can get into if you want, is the silent spectator and the voluntary sacrificial victim. The lower manas, its representative, a tyrannical despot. Truly. she says truly. So yeah, you really get the sense from that quote how important it is to understand in incarnation the role of lower manas versus higher manas, and the influence that the lower aspect of our nature, the 4 lower principles, have. Yeah, the intention was that this is a triangle, and the base of this triangle is manas. It's just the way I drew it. But I think it's important to note that these are not separate, right? This is a medium and a link. Medium means that it's something that it passes through. Like it's not just like they're connected, like 2 things connected. They're actually, one is transmitting influences, back and forth, through each other, right? The medium is the means of transmission from one to the other.
But I think we're very lucky as humanity to have that higher mind, the aspect of the higher mind that attunes itself to the spiritual aspect of us, and that if we change our thinking process to be beneficent to all of humanity, and if we can't go there, at least we can try to be beneficent to our family, our neighbors,
Sure.
on a smaller scale.
Right.
Everyone is not able to just become a Mahatma Gandhi, but we can
Right.
certainly try to be effective in our own way.
Well, like the paramitas, charity, harmony in word and deed, patience. These are things that can be done at the smallest levels in our day-to-day lives and can be done at the highest levels, just depending on how much we practice, how good we become at those things. Yes?
You mentioned that nature exists for the purposes of our development, and you drew those lines in there, and you talked about lighting of the mind. Okay, the mind has been lit in man, which is this is understanding the difference between man, the universe, and everything else, going through natural impulse. We advance to a point where the natural impulse doesn't take us anymore, and that flickering flame that we have when we view the higher mind, if you will, it's up to us to make it glow or not.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, to the students, understanding that's the only difference between what you laid out, which is, man, the universe and everything around us. It's all from the same source, and it's up to us to really lift ourselves up.
Right. It is, in fact, what makes man man. It's where we get the word man, etymologically. That's why we're called man. Human. It comes from manas. It goes back through, Old German to Proto-Indo-European, all the way back to Sanskrit. So, yeah, it's the because we are fifth race beings in this current round, right? Fourth round, fifth race. So we have, as the previous student mentioned, essentially perfected karma, right? That's why we qualified for manas. The lighting up of manas could happen because kama, this top of the lower nature here, was completed. In other words, we're really good at this desire thing. That's what makes it so hard to stay focused on the higher nature, right? It's like we learned to play a song when we were in kindergarten. We play that song really, really well. But as we progress with our instrument, right, and we get into high school, we're expected to play a more complex tune. And as tempting as it is to just go back and play that kindergarten song over and over again, we really need to focus on working harder, making ourselves more aligned with what is essentially a symphony up here versus, kind of older, we've been there, done that levels of evolution. It also gets complex again, this is where you could get into like multiple discussions on this, where the whole line of evolution happened this way because of failures of these beings to incarnate when they were supposed to. They were given bodies, but they held back because they liked the intellectual freedom they had to not involve themselves in matter. And so there was a delay, and this has its karmic repercussions that we're experiencing even now. Again, I only mentioned this briefly. It's not something that I know a lot about, but it's all there in the Secret Doctrine, and it demonstrates just how deep down the rabbit hole you can go in studying this.
I think the difficulty also comes from, she says, that the lower manas assumes the position of the total that does not allow the higher input into our regular lives. Mm-hmm. So then it becomes a personal achievement for each human person to actually overcome that tendency, mm-hmm. because we have given it permission to do so through that karmic principle, because we have fed it. It now assumes that automatically. And she says that's the difficulty, that when some things become a habit, it is extremely difficult. And I think she uses the word indomitable willpower to right. be able to even change it on the physical plane. Right. In other words, the nerve conduction is she's talking about, because you facilitated a particular nerve conduction, and to cut that off and groove another one that will suit your purposes better requires indomitable willpower.
Right. Yeah. The idea of indomitable will reminds the student of virya, dauntless energy that fights its way to the supernal truth. out of the mire of lies terrestrial, right? This is where illusion happens. This is where, clarity and true vision happens, and we're stuck here in the middle. And so it's this process of indomitable will. You can actually go through the virtues listed in the Paramitas and look for their opposites and find that those are the qualities of lower manas. You talked about the lower manas asserting itself as though it was the totality of manas. The intellectual self tends to think that it is all there is, and it isn't. Right? Everything we do, art, music, everything, all is part of manas. All those wonderful, beautiful things. Brain activity is just it's just an instrument of manas. It's not actually the manas itself. If you go to the virtues, kshanti is patience, right? Patience sweet that nothing can ruffle. That's what's the opposite of that? Impatience. That's the quality of lower manas. Harmony in word and act. Being disharmonious in word and act. That's a quality of lower manas.
That's a personality, right?
Yeah. Being uncharitable. Instead of being indifferent to pleasure and to pain, as it says over here, fly to some pleasant idea, fly to some unpleasant idea. Jumping around, being swayed by pleasure and pain. The dauntless energy that fights its way to supernal truth, right? Remain passive, considering nothing. These are the peculiarities the judge listed of the lower mind. So the signs are all there, the prescriptions are all there. It's up to us to assert ourselves and in the highest way possible to find our way to that.
It seems like I'm the only one talking, but that's a tall order, by the way, because anyone who has tried to meditate knows how difficult it is to quieten that lower mind, to bring it to that no movement state, because mind in its turn is the tool of the soul, and that is where we are trying to go to overcome this movement, so that we align ourselves to that electrical activity of the soul, is what we are really trying to do in meditation.
Right.
And that is not an easy thing to do,
Right.
as we all know who try to achieve that. And when you achieve it, you really don't know how you got there either.
Right.
And that needs to become a conscious effort and a conscious achievement, in the sense that when you have actually passed through it,
Right.
and you're in the higher realm. Even if you perceive the higher realm, sometimes you have no memory as to how you got there.
Right.
And I think Mr. Judge says that what we need to do is to, like at night, for instance, we go through all these levels that you have listed here in order to achieve the Turiya state, which is the highest spiritual level of consciousness available to us humans in incarnation. And he says, if you condense your travel to like a tube, that you narrow its sphere, and you can go up and down in that channel continuously, he says, in time it will enable you to remember as to what you do in your soul life, and enable the mind to impress the brain. In other words, you're purifying the brain substance, and it's able to impress it. At this stage, because we are dispersed in our travel up and down through this stage, he says, we don't retain any memory. Have you read something about it?
Yeah. I mean, in passing, I'm sure I have. The analogy sometimes is used is that that it's like a kingdom, and Atma, Buddhi, the higher nature, and Manas are like the kingdom, like the king, and Manas is a servant of the court, right? And it either is always dealing with the people down here and their will, and not what the king is decreeing, right? So the king is essentially, Manas can serve the king and the good of the kingdom, or it can just be one of the people and not effective in the actual health of the kingdom itself. And it's sort of a weak analogy. But if to make an analogy to what you're saying in terms of finding that same path through these states of consciousness, if we are in the wilderness trying to get back to the castle and we don't know the route, we're going to just shoot out in any direction, and every time we go, we're not really getting any closer to the castle. But once we do find that route, we should always take that same route, right? Always to reinforce and to be as efficient and meaningful in getting there as quickly as we can, perhaps.
You know, what you're saying flies in the face of what we're conditioned to understand. We are inherently impatient. We think that if we can't get it within 5 minutes, it's not achievable sometimes. And then we throw it out and we go look for something else. We don't follow that same route. So two things we probably have to work harder at unlearning than we do at learning. You know, learning rather, you know, we got to unlearn a lot of stuff before we can really seriously meditate or do any of these other things.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's the we there, though, in your comment? When we say we are inherently impatient, for just to take that statement on its own.
Let's look at the Western world.
If you say,
I don't know what he's
no, I don't mean I don't mean like who as in individuals. Yeah. I mean, let's say I am inherently impatient. Well, who is the I there? Like what aspect of our nature is the I?
The lower me is impatient.
Yeah, it's the lower nature is inherently impatient, but that is not who we are, right? This is the true who we are. In fact, we call it the reincarnating ego in Latin meaning I, right? This is the pre-Freudian use of the word ego. So the ego, the I, the true I, started out this way without any of these limitations, right? And then it descends into matter. This is that process of evolution, right? We begin by evolving these different principles, and we come around in the fifth race to be working on manas as manasic beings. And so while it feels like we are inherently this, it's only because this is what we've just been working on. This is what we've just struggled to get out of. And we're now trying to achieve what we had before, which is that, rarefied, purified, perfect, one-centered consciousness with the all. But there's a reason why we didn't just stay there, right? We descended into these lower principles in order to evolve. It's the way the system works in terms of becoming and perfecting what it means to be evolving humanity. Of course, in a static system, you would just stay there. Why ever evolve? Why ever manifest even? Why do any of that? That's probably a topic for another time. It could be, it's probably even debatable why that actually happens. It's in the Secret Doctrine, HPB says this is where our minds teeter at the edge of paradox, right? But we know that it's like, it's Descartes' cogito ergo sum, right? I think, therefore I am. I know that I'm evolving because I wouldn't be talking about evolution if I, so there is this evolution happening. Why is something that is left to a consciousness beyond just manasic consciousness, right? So that will be like Buddhic consciousness, would be able to truly understand why do we do that descent through those. Logically, we know that it's because we want to become. It's like the process of becoming, perfecting. Yes.
Doesn't the Secret Doctrine make the statement that without the intelligence of humanity, and she's talking about without physical aspects to ourselves, that none of the kingdoms could have developed to supply us with our sheaths. So I think the evolutionary process is not just for humanity, but for humanity to uplift everything that it touches, because we're made up of elementals, and the elementals, since the elementals are the souls of the elements on earth, then it behooves us to use them correctly. And I think that's another purpose to the evolutionary process, is it not? For us to uplift everything as we uplift ourselves.
It's definitely a mandate. It's an objective within evolution to do this, that this is what happens. But going back to what Crosby says about, I think it's Crosby, I've lost the quote now, where he says that the universe evolves for man, right? So elementals, everything, the whole universe evolves for the sake of man's evolution, right? It is put into place through, the science of cosmology, right? Cosmogony, for the sake of man's evolution. Now, during that process, of course, there are the lower kingdoms of evolution. There's the mineral kingdom, the animal kingdom, the elemental kingdoms, and the animal kingdom, and it is part of man's evolution to influence those as well. And so, yeah, I think within the context, you're correct, but I think the larger perspective is that all of that happens for the sake of man. Man contributes back to it. It's all part of like a give and take process, isn't it?
Well,
bottom line is we cannot improve without uplifting everything around us.
That is the bottom line. Right?
You said we're the fifth sub-race of the fifth root, this being the fourth round. And Secret Doctrine says that the substance we used in the previous rounds was not the same as we are using today. That at one time, for instance, the breathing process had to be accomplished consciously,
right.
That it was not an automatic process. Same with digestion, for instance. So that means that we have cultivated those elementals.
Yes.
We have given them a higher intelligence so that they can actually perform those tasks.
Right.
Otherwise, how would we incorporate them into our physical frame today?
Right. That definitely is happening. That does happen, yes.
Yeah. So it becomes then our responsibility at this stage, since we're the highest intellect in the universe, to contribute to their lives consciously.
Right.
And
yeah, that's an excellent point.
There.
It's not just our own individual progress that's at stake here. I guess if we could take away from what you're saying, it's about the whole entire evolution of humanity, evolution of the lower kingdoms of nature. It's the evolution of the universe.
Because as a biologist, if you look under the microscope, the cell structure is exactly in the human being the same as the logos. So, and when HPV says each atom itself is going to become a man in a future mantra, then we need to pay attention to it.
Very much so, yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay.
All this seems very foreign. I mean, after studying this for 20 years, it's not very foreign anymore. But when you walk into it, all this seems like a fairy tale.
Well, and it's an excellent point. It can be a little bit overwhelming to drill into it in this much detail, and even still, especially knowing that that's just sort of scratching the surface.
We just tipped it. You have to tip of the iceberg.
It really is. So that was why I thought it was important to include the paramitas, the virtues. This is a poetic work, not an academic work, right? And it is meant to inspire, not to instruct, though it does instruct. And so if we can see that the work we have to do here is well captured, in a way that is very accessible and practical, right? It's very practical to just be on the, to be mindful, you'll forgive the pun, of being patient, to be mindful of limiting our reactionary nature to pleasure and pain, and to be energetic in our quest for truth, right? These are just basic principles that we can take away from all of this conceptual stuff. Knowing that we are not this, but that thou art, it can make a difference in our daily lives, hopefully. That's at least the intention of talks like this.
I'd like to add one more
Sure.
sentence. That Atma, even though it is a universal principle, it shines on us, and the core of the first logos is love. Compassion is love.
Mhm.
Compassion is the great quality of nature, and it has love in its center because its concern is for all of the cosmos, not just humanity, not just the lower kingdom, not just the upper kingdoms. There is an interconnectedness of everything in the universe, and its concern is for the all, with A-L-L capitalized in the secret doctrine.
Mhm.
So if we come from love, and if we can express it towards others, I think it's the key to moving forward. Because if you don't love your neighbor, you don't love your family, well, what would you be doing for others? Truly.
Truly.
So,
Exactly. It also makes us look differently.
Go ahead.
And it makes us look differently at these, quote, perfected beings, whether we view it as Jesus or whatever, that we're all made of the same stuff, as the precursors of the HPB and HPB pointed out over and over again. That thou art, that's where we're headed,
Mhm.
and we look at them as our elder brothers.
Well, and as well we should. She mentioned specifically Jesus and the Buddha as having perfected manas. Not only these, this lower nature, and this is nothing to them, right? But manas, they're done with what we're trying to do now. That's why they can be so instructive.
I was also reading on the sevenfold nature like that. These perfected beings have already woven themselves this body that they can appear in and be out of. And it's not a sevenfold nature for them, it's a threefold nature.
Okay.
That's what I was reading.
All right. Definitely a good topic for another
I can't say that
time.
based on experience.
The message is that we are all one.
yeah.
And how do we evolve without others? We have to evolve together.
Mhm.
So it's incorrect to say that some are more evolved beings than others, or is it true that some can be?
Some can be. We're all at different stages in our evolution. But you had to look at it this way. It's the Mahayana, right? It's the great vehicle.
Right.
We're all in the same bus. Some of us are sitting right up at front. There's one guy's actually driving. There's other people who are at the back who don't even really realize they're on a bus, and they have no. It's like there's a variation within a larger cycle, right? But that if somebody falls out the back of the bus, that bus has to stop. It can't continue on to its destination without everybody coming through. So.
That there's two schools, right? Mahayana and another.
Yeah,
One says-
Hinayana is what the Mahayana is called, the other school, but it's really Theravada.
This seems like a philosophy where everyone must reach enlightenment before anyone can individually,
Okay.
much like that, which probably ties into nonviolence.
And every other virtue, right? Anything we can do to contribute to the greater good, right, is going to contribute to our own good, right? I mean, in terms of evolving and achieving the higher principles.
But always keeping in mind, we are all at different stages of development. The perfected beings are with us. Many of us, probably most of us, are not really at a point where we would even recognize that person as a perfected being. And
True.
yet they're with us.
True.
They're in their golden age.
Right.
We're in our dark age,
Yeah,
working toward that. So
Right.
we're all developing.
right.
We can't.
I mean-
we can't progress too much on our own.
A dog
I
has
think hopefully
perfected
we have
its
no life.
physical, right? A dog has life energy and an astral, and a
Right.
dog certainly has desire. But it doesn't have this lighting up of mind. But the dog doesn't know that, right? So the dog, in the presence of us, doesn't think of us as, it doesn't recognize us as gods, right? We're just another animal that it's interacting with in some way, right? So, I mean, there may be, I hear what you're saying. There may be,
Review on that.
there may be some inklings, right? There may be some like latent tendencies in the dog to be kind of like surprised by certain things, you know? But I think a lot of a dog's behavior in its interaction with humans can be ascribed to its same behavior in its interaction with other mammals. It's just a pretty biological thing happening there. Oh, with so many hands now all of a sudden.
Well, go to the other bit.
Okay.
I think I've heard that in The Secret, or Blavatsky has written about dogs, is that correct?
Yeah.
And that they are more evolved to our, like we
Sure.
co-evolved together, and thus
Well,
we're
Them
really
and elephants.
connected.
yeah, I mean, if you think about just objectively, I mean, you can see that our karma with, you know, the dog kingdom, right, and with the cat kingdom and with the horse kingdom maybe, these are much more significant than our interaction with whales or with you know, name any other animal, giraffes, right? We have obviously some karma with all of these different groups, but you can see pretty clearly that dogs have a special relationship with humanity, as do other pets.
Can I just say one thing?
Yeah, sure.
In the animal kingdom, instinct is perfect
Mhm.
because they live their lives by instinct. They build their homes, find their food, mate, and raise their young according to that instinct. And at the beginning, our instinct was as sharp as it is exhibited
Right.
in the animal kingdom. But what we have achieved is self-consciousness, which
Right.
does not exist in the other kingdoms. However, there was a program on PBS where they were showing how humanity affects the lower kingdoms, the animal kingdoms, the ones that we are actually associating with. And they're saying that, this is also Theosophy magazine, the statement is this, that those animals, when left in their own kingdom, are under the jurisdiction of their group souls,
Mhm.
that they know what to do in danger, in injury, whatever the situation, they know how to cover it. But when they relate themselves to the human kingdom and become subservient to our will, then we become their protectors,
Right.
and they lose that ability to
Mhm.
take care of themselves,
Right.
especially the dogs and the cats, because the article said when a dog is sick, they eat absolutely nothing. They just go into a corner and they lick their wound to cure it, and it eventually is cured. They know how to do it under that group soul. This student was really amazed when reading that the statement that we can actually negatively affect the kingdom that way,
Mhm.
because there was a dog who can actually smell cancer
Right.
in a human being,
Yeah, they train them
because
for
their
that now.
smell is so advanced.
Right.
It's shocking, but it's true. They can smell it.
Yeah.
The cancer has a smell. It's a silent killer,
I know.
but they know how to smell it out.
It is
It
amazing.
was amazing.
We have certainly a lot to learn
From them.
From them, yeah. I mean, it's not that much different than the impact that we had on ourselves through this process, right? We had instinct, like you said, perfected, but by voluntarily, willingly going into a state of awareness, like where we're consciously saying, I'm going to do this by self-induced efforts, not just by natural impulse, then all of a sudden we've got work to do that isn't coming naturally. It isn't just automatically happening, and it's
Yeah, but
that's how we evolve.
well, that's only after we reach the middle of the fourth round.
Yes.
Until that point, nature pushes
Yes.
all of its kingdoms, including humanity, forward
Right.
because it's trying to express itself in a higher manner. But since we have reached the middle of the fourth round and we're now circling toward spirituality, that is self-induced, self-devised effort. And you said we need to be vigilant, your expression, I think,
Yeah,
with that work.
right.
Yeah.
Went a little over, so we'll wrap it up there. Next week is Seats of Memory. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We'll have a short break now and regroup and having a roundtable discussion on the key to Theosophy. And folks in YouTube, we'll see you next Sunday at 11 o'clock. Thank you.